Kip, we would take a little bit more time to talk about some of the old stuff, but man, we have really eaten through our time here. So I'm going to jump forward a little bit to a
Sure.
question I'm sure that 95% of the people who are watching this, either now or later, are going to ask. So I'm going to ask you,
Let's do it.
why Square Subwoofers?
Good question. The reason Kicker did Square Subwoofers is Steve Irby, several other people at the company, we're all sitting around and talking about, we build these square boxes or rectangular boxes all day long, and we put round woofers in them. And our customers, they're always looking for more. It doesn't matter what you give them, they always want more. And of course, there's the joke, and I'll say it here, and hopefully people have a sense of humor. There's only two things. There's on and more on. And so most people want more on. And so they were sitting around, and Steve was going like, okay, we've got this Solobaric round subwoofer, which the round one was first. And it would allow you to take a 12-inch subwoofer and have it work in about a 0.88 cubic foot enclosure and actually give you true full range bass in a car. He's like, so they can put more woofers in, but there comes this point where if you put in all the woofers you can put in, how do we give them more bass? And that's where he came up with this idea. He says, what if we make them square? And if you make them square geometrically, and some people tell you, that's just a marketing gimmick, and I'll unabashedly say there is a marketing gimmick to a square subwoofer, but it's also the only geometric shape that if you take and come up with a maximum size that you can make a circle, you can make a triangle, you can make a hexagon, you can make a pentagon, you can also then make a square, and square trumps all of them on surface area. So all things being equal, if I have a round subwoofer that's got 15 millimeters of X max, and I've got a square subwoofer that's got 15 millimeters of X max, and they're both 10 inches from outside corner to outside corner, the square surface area is about 23% larger than the round surface area. And I know it sounds really simple, but the truth of the matter is when it comes to making bass and pressurizing and rarefying air, it's bore and stroke. How big is it? That's your bore. And how far does it move? That's your stroke. So if I've got a round driver versus a square driver, and they're both 10s or both 12s, the square driver is going to have more bore, so that's going to give you more bass. You're going to move more air with that square cone driver than you are in a round. And by applying the Solobaric technology that Steve already invented, he could put that woofer in the same size box that someone was already using. So if you've got a pair of, say, Solobaric 10s, and all of a sudden you say, I just want more bass, you could upgrade to a pair of Solobaric L7 10s and pick up 23% more moving cone area, and you don't have to change anything else. Just take the round hole that's in the box and cut it square and drop it in. And that's really where it started. It's how do we give customers more with what they've got without having to go too extreme. And that was literally the start of, I'll call it an industry altering mindset on woofers, because it created a rift that there are people that like to say, well, square woofers make square waves, they don't make music. And I jokingly tell people all the time, I go, have you ever thrown a brick into a pond? And I get a look and go, well, yeah, I've thrown bricks into ponds, I've thrown rocks. I said, what shape are the waves coming away from a square brick when you throw it in a pond? Is it square waves, or are they round and circular? And people have to pause and they go, well, they're round and circular. I go, exactly. The diaphragm, or whatever's moving the air, doesn't determine the shape. Energy radiates from that moving pulse in a concentric 360-degree pattern. It doesn't matter what the shape of the item creating that pulse is, the energy disperses in a 360-degree pattern. So there's the people who say square woofers can't sound good. Well, that's not true either. There's people who say square woofers sound is round. Well, I don't know where you get that philosophy, because if you really look at sound, it's not really round, it's waves, and they go up and down and go back and forth. They're not circular. But there is a lot of people that, they fight that mindset of well, a square woofer just doesn't make sense. And so it does create that rift. The interesting thing for me, and I've been with the company long enough, so it's kind of cool, is I remember back in 2000, 2001, when we launched that woofer, at that time I was working in tech, and we were tasked with making a wall to actually show off the new Square L7 technology. So what we did is we took a bunch of aluminum tubing and made a 4x4 array, which would hold 16 subwoofers, and it was in free air. So it was just an aluminum rack, so you could walk around and see the back of the woofer, you could see the front of the woofer. We took that down and hooked it up to two Crown Macrotech amplifiers, and then we took a tone generator and brought it out on a cable so that you could select the frequency, and then you could also adjust the output. So basically it lets you look at that whole wall of woofers just moving in free air, and you could walk around behind and see it move. You could stand on the side and see it move. And I can remember as clearly sitting here today as I can that day that happened. Is we're setting this up at CES, we're putting this display together, and of course it's before the show opens, you're setting up your booth, And there's not a brand that you could tell me from that era that their guys, because it is a small industry and most all of us know someone in another company, they would all walk by and they would stop and they would look at it and then they'd walk up to me and go, Kip, you guys figured it out. We've been trying to make a Square subwoofer work for a long time and you guys beat us to it. And so there are a lot of companies in the industry at the time that were all on the same page and none of us really knew it. It's how do we give the customer more? And everyone was on that Square woofer concept. It's just Kicker happened to be the one that got to the finish line first, and we figured out how we can make a Square subwoofer that, you know, it's easy to get it to move on the long edge of the driver, but when you get into those corners, how do I make that move up and down and have control and have enough flex and give so that I can still have X-Max or have the ability for the driver to move? And we were fortunate and blessed to figure it out and got there first.
And you know, I think I know the answer to this. This wasn't on the sheet, but how did the first generation L7? What's the L7 in? What's the importance of that to the subwoofer? I think I know, but I want to hear it from you.
L7 means?
Yeah.
Okay. If you do L.
Yep. All right. I knew it.
And there's actually songs from the 50s, and you know, even Huey Lewis sang it back in the 80s. It's hip to be square, and the term L7 always meant square. Sometimes it referred to the person as being a nerd or a geek or square. So actually, L7, and if they're listening, I mean, I'd tell them, I mean, because I know several of the guys who work for JL Audio, I'd have them say, well, you guys are just trying to copy off W7, and you're just calling yours L7. And I go, and they looked at me and went, oh, we get it now. It means square. Got it.
Yeah,
So
I heard that, and I just wanted to get it confirmed.
Yeah, L7 was actually the internal code word that we came up with to talk about the project when we were out on the road or in public or whatever. That way we could talk about it, and people who weren't in the development path wouldn't know what we were talking about. You know, if we're talking, we would say, well, how's the L7 project going, or what's going on with L7 development? And no one knew what we were discussing. And it just kind of stuck. And we like, when it came time for marketing to come up with what we were going to call these things, and Steve was on there, obviously, he said, you know, I like this. Let's just stick with L7. There's a story behind it. It actually signifies the shape of the woofer, and there's a lot to it. So let's just stick with it. So actually, the internal code name that we used to keep people from knowing what we were doing just stuck, and that became the name.
Now, speaking of code names, what's the code name for the SPL series of subwoofers you guys are working on right now?
Are we working on a line?
Silence in the industry.
Excuse
Silence.
me, I need to get a drink.
Rob, see, that's why you don't let Rob sign anything.